Hannah Murray on TRE in the afternoon.
Joining us on the line now is Bruna De Palo. She's a neuroscience-based executive coach and leadership strategist with over 3,000 hours of experience helping leaders in Fortune 500 companies, including Google and American Express. Her book, The Brain Instruction Manual for Leaders, What Nobody Told You About Working with Humans, asks why leaders experience the same problems again and again. Miscommunication, stress, resistance, and conflict. Bruna says the problem isn't you, it's your brain. Welcome to the show, Bruna.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Anna.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for being with us. So tell me where your research started with this, why you put this book together.
This book was born by the fact that many people aspirate. So part of my job is also speaking in conferences. And every time I stopped, I ended my talks, people were asking, oh, that's interesting. Where can we learn more? And I found out that there were a lot of amazing books about neuroscience, a lot of amazing books about leadership, nothing that would combine the two in a very practical way. So that's where it began in terms of book. And in terms of research, it all happened when I requalified as a coach more than 10 years ago. I was in tech before, then I decided to change my career. I requalified. And to be honest, I was feeling really uncomfortable with the training I received. It was known as one of the best. The problem was in my qualification, it was just practice. There was no theory at all. So we were told what to do. We were not told why we were supposed to do things in that way. So that prompted me to study. And the more I studied psychology to have more foundations, I realized I was more attracted by the brain. And the more I started reading and studying about the brain, the more naturally it became to me to talk about this openly with my new clients. And then I noticed that they were moving faster and they were much more committed when I explained them the behind the scenes. If we have to apply a tool or a technique, yes, but why does this work? On what dynamic of the brain and the body is this technique working on? What is leveraging? And I realized that clients, especially men, not only, of course, but especially men, because they tend to be more pragmatic, analytic, rational, perhaps skeptical towards this kind of approach. I mean, coaching by that. They were much more into that because they could understand the mechanics behind these things. It's not just techniques. It's not just do that because it's going to work. This is how we function, and that's why this technique will work. And it made them much more committed and move faster. So that's where the idea of investing in this approach, which I call neuroscience-based coaching approach, came from. And then the book, of course, was the natural progression.
Yeah. So what is the connection between neuroscience and leadership?
My point is, what I argued in the book, is that leaders, some people, very few, unfortunately, are born enlightened. So they know naturally, instinctively, what's the right thing to do. But my point is that we shouldn't talk about what is the right thing to do, because in all honesty, right or wrong, it's completely volatile. What can be wrong from one perspective can be right from another one. So it's irrelevant. What really matters for a leader is effectiveness. So what makes leader act more effectively is understanding how the machine works. So it all comes down to the fact that what the body does and also what we do as human behavior, it all depends on how the brain works. So if you understand those dynamics, then you can better understand why people behave in a certain way. And of course, if you're a leader, you want your people to be proactive, innovative, collaborative with you and with each other. So how do you achieve that? Well, you have two ways. One, you can read a lot of books or go to a lot of learning development trainings and learn techniques. The truth is, at the right moment, you will forget them. You won't remember them, especially if you are under pressure. And how do I know that? Well, because if all these books and techniques alone would work, we would all by now know what is the right thing to do. So the other option is learning how the machine works, the internal machine, and then applying a technique knowing what is it you're actually trying to achieve, what dynamic are you trying to leverage. So it gives you more understanding of both the machines that you are operating, yours as a leader, because you also need to, manage your pressure, anxiety, and so on, and also trying to achieve the best from the person that is in front of you. So learning This is neuroscience, but it's more kind of applied neuroscience. The practical side of neuroscience will help you move in a more effective way because you know what you're doing.
So can you give us a couple of examples of the kind of thing that people can be doing to apply neuroscience to be better leaders?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind also because it's one of the biggest challenges that leaders are facing right now is how to reduce resistance to change. We live in a world that has never been more uncertain than right now. And what happens, and now especially even more with AI, is that teams have to face continuous changes. And change is the most metabolically expensive thing that can happen to a brain. So the brain naturally tends to resist change, not just because, it's a habit, it's a survival mechanism. So by understanding this, you already understand that it's not about them resisting, it's just their brain. And it's a biological process that needs to be respected and honored because it's a good thing. Now, the point is, I still have to make this change happen. So how am I going to reduce their resistance? Well, if you know that this is costing them a lot of energy, your job is to reduce cost of energy. What is that is very expensive for a brain in a change is the uncertainty. And we already have a lot of uncertainty coming from the rest of the world. So your number one job as a leader is to always reduce the level of uncertainty, ambiguity, ambivalence that is there. Now, change, it's intrinsic in a change to bring uncertainty. So your job is to make that uncertain more certain as possible. So you want to focus on what will happen once that change has been put in place. What will we achieve? And why is this so important? In a way that is also feels emotional. Why am I talking about emotions? Because emotions are a key part of how we do things. And especially in business, for a long time, we left the emotions outside of the office. But emotions run our human behavior. So if you understand that and you create a vision of what will be different once that change has been achieved, it can be also, implementing a new software, for example, especially if we talk about AI. How can this be emotional? Well, help your team think what will be different in their lives if they invest in making this change happen. Perhaps you will help them see that at the end of the day, they will have more energy. And what they will do with that energy, they will invest more in their kids, playing with them, playing sport, spending time with their spouse. So it's always a matter of what will reduce uncertainty here, what will reduce the amount of energy they need to invest in this change rather than trying to do the right thing. So helping them have an emotional vision of what will happen in concrete terms will definitely help them be on the journey. So another thing that can help them be more present, so reduce their resistance, is to honor their level of autonomy. So if you're the boss and you've been imposed a change in your organization, you might need to impose that change on your team. But you know that if you strip sense of autonomy out of them, that level of uncertainty and that level of resistance will increase. So what can you do in that moment is to give them some sense of autonomy, some room for decision or space. So you're still in charge of the change, but because you know that that's how the brain works, when there's no autonomy, the brain tends to feel more defensive, and you want to reduce that defensiveness, give them some level of autonomy. So tell them, for example, that this needs to change in a month from now, but the how this is going to be implemented, it's up to them. And ask them, for example, how are you going to do it? What can you implement right now that will cost you less energy? So it's a matter of playing with these dynamics so that they can naturally feel less resistant. So it's not just a matter of motivating them. In business, we often talk about the importance of motivating people. But good luck if you want to have an effective team by constantly motivating them. Firstly, people get motivated by different things. And not necessarily everything about your team members. Secondly, you should constantly be their motivational speaker. That's not going to be an effective strategy. So what is that actually motivate people is, for example, when every human being feels seen, heard, and felt, and giving them that level of autonomy, it's an implicit way to say, I see you, I trust you, I hear you, I trust your thinking. So if you give space to these people to do that, they will naturally be with you. They won't need to become defensive. And that's how you lower level of resistance that you need to lower in order to make that change happen. Now, this can be done in two ways, Anna. I can tell you what are the techniques to do that. And to be honest, it's much easier and quicker. Not sure if it's sustainable, because again, there are a lot of books about this, but we still struggle with that challenge. Or, as I do with my clients, I can teach you how the machine works. So you don't have to remember all these things at the right moment when it's needed, because you own it. It's a little bit like having an understanding, for example, of how digestion works. I can tell you, don't eat a big lasagna and then go for a run, because it's not going to be effective. Then in 3 months, you might say, oh, what is that I shouldn't do? Go to run before the lasagna or after the lasagna? Well, if I explain at a high level how digestion works, you will know on your own what's best to do. So it's really about understanding the machine so that we can go back and live again like human beings. How we treat our internal machine and how we treat others.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And what about stress? Because a lot of business people, leaders particularly, suffer with stress, running a business and having to sort out the wages and the money coming in and the growing the business. There's a lot to do, a lot to think about, and it all falls back to the leader. So stress is a big problem.
Exactly. So again, even here, I have a few answers for you. First of all, I think we have to change our idea of what it means being a leader and understand that not all the problems have to be solved by us. You have a team, let's say you have 6 people. Well, your best bet is when you create the conditions for their brains to perform at their best. And when they perform at their best, because again, you know how to do it because you know how the machine works, then you can have their help in solving those problems. So for example, one of the problems that my clients are having recently in the last few years is managing a team that is multicultural and multi-generational. It's really not easy. Some leaders have up to 5 generations to lead at the same time. It's really challenging. Again, especially if you think that your job is motivating them. Well, good luck in motivating so many different mindsets. So how can you solve the problems that this kind of team can have and generally face? Well, ask them. You can ask them. They have to have very clear in mind what is the problem. What is the problem that the leader is suffering? What is the problem that the team is suffering? And what is the perhaps underlying problems that they are suffering? The moment you make this clear, they're more inclined to give you ideas on how the problems can be solved. And when they do this, it means they are co-designing the solution. And when human beings co-design a solution, they're naturally more inclined to fight for it, to defend it, to put it into practice, rather than you, perhaps with a coach or a consultant, coming out with a brilliant ideas or how you're organizing things so that, this multiculturalism can become an asset instead of a challenge. But if you impose the idea from the top, again, good luck having them supporting you. You're not honoring that sense of autonomy that, for example, we mentioned before. So by asking them, by involving them, by making it explicit, what's the problem and what they think they might be the solution, it removes some of your burden. So going back to the problem of stress, how to manage stress, what is stress? Stress is a mobilization of energy. The brain is constantly predicting what is about to happen and how much energy will be needed to face what is about to happen. So energy management is crucial for the brain and therefore for our survival. Being under chronic stress, it's not a big problem if you're stressed for a while. the body is resilient enough and can handle this. But if it's chronic, it means there's not enough energy for the brain to do its job properly. And the major job of the brain is to send the right amount of energy to the right organs at the right time. All in all, that means health. But when some organs are not doing their job at the right time, this imbalance can cause some health issues. So when we talk about stress is this mobilization of energy that instead of going where it's supposed to go to let us function in a healthy way, it's energy that goes towards protection or defense because something is making us feel there's a potential threat. And again, uncertainty and even more change is a huge perceived threat for the brain. So what the brain does, it mobilizes a lot of energy to face that uncertainty and the potential scenarios instead of sending it to the right organs at the right time. That's what stress. So if you understand that, I hope you can see that your job is not just having techniques to handle stress, it's just to replan your work in a different way. And when you start noticing signals, the fact that you can still be resilient, it doesn't mean that you actually are. Because as I say, this imbalance over a prolonged time, at some point it will present you with a bill. And it might be too late. So the fact that you can still go, it doesn't mean that you should. So your job becomes energy management. If you do energy management, you don't have to do stress management later. And what does it mean, managing your energy? Well, it can mean many things. But, very often this means the usual suspects, like a good night's sleep, eating healthy, walking, a little bit of sport, social interactions, all the things that we know are healthy for us. But the fact that we know that they're healthy doesn't mean we actually put them into practice. But when you see what's the impact on your brain, on your stress level, therefore your relationship with your team, therefore the company revenues and so on, when you connect all the dots, you're more inclined to take care of your sleep, for example, because there's no way that you can manage your energy effectively if you don't sleep well at night. And if like me, you're in an age where sleep is affected by your hormonal imbalance, you know that you need to double down your effort to sleep well. And anything else has to come afterward. Work, kids, finances, everything else, because it all depends on that. So again, we know sleep is important, but it's when you see all the dots connected and you reveal the grand design that you actually see how important it is. And that's why you snap at your kids. You're not patient with that team member, which comes from a different culture, therefore is more difficult to deal with, and so on. So it's a matter of really owning and translating what neuroscience has told us in the last 20 years, translating it into something that you can actually action and is not just interesting. So that's the purpose of my job. And the book is really help people use this information in a practical way, not just leaving it as an interesting read.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, if people want to get a copy of the Brain Instruction Manual for Leaders, it's available on our website, tre.radio, and it's by Bruna De Palo, who we've been chatting with today. Bruna, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, everyone.